Hi, everybody. This is section 2.1, multiplying and dividing integers. I'm going to walk you through these notes with this video, and then you guys will be able to start the homework for today. So we're in chapter 2 now, and chapter 2 is titled Multiplying and Dividing Rational Numbers. And just like we started with chapter 1, we're going to focus on integers first. So today we're just looking at integers, your positive and negative counting numbers, and we're going to see based off this table here if we can identify a pattern when it comes to using multiplication. So you already know that 2 times 2 is 4. You know that 1 times 2 is 2, and you even know that 0 times 2 is 0. But what happens when we multiply by negatives? Well, let's continue this pattern of going down by 2 each time. You can see that 4 goes to 2, 2 goes to 0, and if we go 2 lower than that, that would make this negative 2. 2 lower than that would make this negative 4, and 2 lower than that would make this negative 6. So essentially what we can see is when you multiply positive 2 by a negative number, you get essentially what you would have gotten if it was a positive, if it was a positive number, except there's a negative in front. So when we multiply a positive by a negative, we get a negative answer. I'll say that again. When we multiply a positive number by a negative number, we get a negative product or a negative answer. On the other side of this chart, now we're going to multiply a negative number by a positive number. You can see negative 3 times 3 is negative 9, which checks out. That makes sense because we just said that a negative number times a positive number should be a negative answer. So 3 times 3 is 9, so negative 9. And then negative 3 times positive 2 gives us negative 6. Negative 3 times positive 1 is negative 3. And if we continue this pattern, we can see what happens when you multiply a negative by 0 or a negative by a negative. And so this pattern would show us that it's going up by 3 every time. So this would be 0. Obviously, anything times 0 is 0. Negative 3 times 0 is 0. And if we go 3 above that, we'll get positive 3. And if we go 3 above that, we'll get positive 6. So what's happening is if you multiply a negative number by a negative number, you get a positive answer. So a negative times a positive is a negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. And that's what we see as we multiply our integers here. When you multiply a negative number by a positive number, your product is going to be negative. And when you multiply a negative number by a negative number, your product is going to be positive. What's happening is that when you multiply, the rules are different from when you add or subtract. When you multiply, the negative signs will pair up. So if you have a negative sign and a negative sign, what will happen is that those negative signs will pair up and form a positive. And that's what we see happen here. Whoopsies. That's what we see happen here. Two negatives make a positive. But if you only have one negative number, there's not another negative sign for it to make a positive symbol with. Okay. Two negative factors will pair up to make a positive product. How can you tell if they're going to pair up? How can you tell? Well, if I asked you to pair up today and I said you can only have one person in your group, you can only have groups of two or pairs, you'd be able to tell if we have an odd or even number. If there's an even number of people, everybody could pair up. And if there's an odd number, somebody's left out. So that's exactly how it works with negatives. If there's an even number of negatives, so if there's 0 negatives, or if there's 2 negatives, or if there's 4 numbers that are negative that you're multiplying together, or if you're multiplying 6 or 8 or so on, then you're going to end up with a positive answer because all those negatives will be able to pair up. But if you only have one negative number, or 3 negative numbers, or 5 negative numbers, or any odd number of negative numbers that you're multiplying, they won't all be able to pair up. There'll be one that doesn't get put in a group or a pair. And so the answer would be negative. Okay, so let's look at this chart, see if we can see this better. All right, our factors are 2 and 5. 2 times 5. How many negative numbers are there? None. There are no negatives. Is 0 odd or even? We're going to say it's even. Certainly can't be odd because it's not 1, 3, 5, 7, right? And so because of that, our product is going to be positive. 2 times -5 has one negative number now, and 1 is odd. And 2 times -5 is going to give us a negative. In fact, it's going to give us -10, and our previous answer would give us +10, right? What if the 2 is negative instead of the 5? So what if this number is the negative number instead of this one? Does it matter? Well, if I was going to war, it would matter who the larger army is, but that's not how multiplication rules work. All that matters is how many negative numbers you have. In this problem, I still only have one negative number, which is odd. So that would also give me -10, a negative answer, right? So it doesn't matter if it's the 5 that's negative or if it's the 2 that's negative. If there's one negative, my answer will be negative. And this next one, we can see we have a -2 and a -5. That's two negatives, and that's going to be an even amount. They'll be able to pair up and make a positive. Okay. But either way, 2 times 5 gives you 10. So it's not the 10 that's changing, it's just the sign that's changing. Do I have one negative number? If so, my answer is going to be negative. Or do I have two negative numbers? If so, my answer is going to be positive. Okay. This next one, now we have a 2 times a 3 times a 4. Two of those numbers are negative, which is even. Two of those numbers are negative, so they'll pair up and make a positive. And if I do the math now that I know my answer is positive, 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 4 is 24. That would give us positive 24. Take those same three numbers, 2, 3, and 4. You multiply them together to get 24. But now I've got 1, 2, 3 negatives. So even though I still multiply them to get 24, since 3 is an odd number of negatives, I've got 3 of them, I'm going to end up with a -24 now. So it's not the 24 that changes, it's the sign in front of the number that changes. Okay, so these rules are different from our addition and subtraction rules. If I was adding two negative numbers, they would join forces and stay negative. But if I'm multiplying two negative numbers, not only do I get 24, but the two negatives pair up to make a positive 24. Okay, so it's not the same rules we've been using. It's a completely different set of rules. It's honestly like playing checkers and chess. I would say everything we did last chapter is like playing chess. If it's a subtraction problem, I have to rewrite it as addition. And even if it's an addition, the signs are different. So I have to go to war, which means I have to subtract. And it can be confusing. And if you've played chess before, there are a lot of rules with chess. Each piece moves different spaces. And even if you know how they move, to be an expert chess player, you have to think 4 or 5 moves ahead. And it can be very difficult to learn how to play chess. But most of you know how to play checkers. And that's honestly what I think we're going to be doing today. We're going to multiply these negatives, and it's really simple. One negative number, your answer is negative. Two negative numbers, your answer is positive. It's pretty simple. Just like checkers is a lot easier game to play than chess, even though they're both played on the same board. So let's find some products. -3 times -7. Well, 3 times 7 is 21, and two negatives will make a positive. 8 times -6. 8 times 6 is 48. But I only have one negative, so my answer is going to be negative. It doesn't have anybody to pair up with. Example C, -4 times +9. 4 times 9 is 36. And then I only have one negative. So it can't pair up. It's going to be -36. Example D, 5 times 11 is 55. And now I have two negatives. They can pair up because that's an even amount, and they'll make a positive. So do I have two negatives? If so, my answer is positive. If I have one negative, my answer is negative. Okay, a lot easier rules. I'm not switching from multiplication to division. Like when we went to war, we'd have to subtract, even though it was an addition problem. I don't have to do that this chapter. The rules with negatives will be a lot easier in chapter 2 because I'm multiplying and dividing. Example E, 4 times 5 is 20. 20 times 6 is 120. 2 times 6 is 12, and add a 0. And then because I have two negatives, that answer will be positive 120. Example F. 3 times 5 is 15. 15 times 3 is 45. But I've got 1, 2, 3 negatives. So it's going to be negative 45 because 3 is an odd amount. If I ask them to pair up, somebody's left out. And so that means this answer is going to be a negative. In our next one, 6 times 3 times 2 times 5. I think what I'm going to do here is use the associative property and do this part first and get 2 times 5 is 10. And then 6 times 3 is 18. I think that's going to be easier than doing 6 times 3 times 2 times 5 in that order. I'm going to flip it around a little bit, and we're going to call this 180. And then I've got 1, 2 negatives, so it'll be positive 180. Example H, I'm also going to do this in a different order. I'm going to use the commutative property, and I'm going to put the 5 next to the 2 over here. I'm going to pair those together. 5 times 2 is 10. And then if I do the 8 and the 7, 8 and 7 is 56. And 56 times 10 is 560. I think that's going to be easier than doing 5 times 8 times 7 times 2 in that order. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. 4 is even. They can pair up and it'll be a positive number, positive 560. So you can actually tell what your sign's going to be before you even start multiplying. You can see there's 4 negatives. Okay, this next one. Well, I know that when you multiply by a bunch of ones, you're going to get a 1. But how many negative numbers do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And this guy here makes 8. So I've got 8 negatives. These can pair up, these can pair up, these can pair up, and these can pair up. So we're going to end up with a positive 1 as our answer. So that's what I mean when I say, do you have an even or an odd number of them? Because if I have, in this last problem, I had 8 negatives, right? Since 8 is even, that's going to give us a positive answer. So you can tell what the sign's going to be just by counting how many negative numbers you have. Now, division uses the same rules as multiplication. If I've got 2 negatives, my quotient will be positive. If I've got 1 negative, my quotient will be negative, except there's one exception. You are not allowed to divide by 0. So what that means is if you see a number, let's say 10, divided by 0, you cannot do that. Cannot do that. If it's written like this, 10 divided by 0, like a fraction, 10 divided by 0, same thing, you also can't do that. 0 cannot be your divisor. It cannot be the number you're dividing by. You can't split something into nothing. It doesn't even make sense. Now, if you didn't want to divide it, you'd actually just be dividing it by 1. Let's say you had $10 and you didn't want to share it with anybody. You'd be dividing by 1 because you're keeping it to yourself. But you can't take $10 and split it into nothing. That doesn't make sense. Now, that doesn't mean you can't see 0 in your problem at all. 0 can be the first number. If 0 is the first number, that's perfectly fine. Or if 0 is the top number, that's perfectly fine. You can have $0 and split it 10 ways. If you split $0 10 ways, everybody gets $0, right? So these problems have numerical answers. It's just 0. So what do we put then if it's divide by 0? We can't put 0 because we're not allowed to do it. What we're going to write is the word undefined. Undefined is the mathematical word we use for that. Undefined. 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 I'm also okay if you want to abbreviate it, UNDF. Okay, you can abbreviate it undefined. You'll have some homework questions, and if you abbreviate it, UNDF, that'll work. You can also type out the word undefined too. That's okay. So keep an eye out for dividing by 0. We're not allowed to do that. Example A, 16 divided by 4 is 4, but there's 1 negative. So since 1 is odd, my answer would be negative 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3, and there are 2 negatives. Those 2 negatives are going to partner up and make a positive, so positive 3. 26 divided by 13 is 2, and there's 1 negative, so negative 2. 0 divided by negative 6. Okay, so 0 divided by negative 6, this is one that I can do. The reason I can do it is because the number I'm dividing by isn't 0. So 0 is not allowed to be my second number, right? But it can be my first number. It can be my first number. Excuse me. So 0 divided by 6 would be 0. There is one negative number, but that honestly doesn't matter because there's no such number as -0. 0 doesn't have a sign. So even though I would put a negative answer here, because it's 0, I'm just going to leave it as 0 because 0 is neutral. So you can do this problem. This is a good problem. We can do this one. Next one, 32 divided by 4 is 8. Two negatives make a positive, so +8. I know in 6th grade, you guys do your mental multiplication facts. You do a big bracket challenge with that. Knowing your mental multiplication facts also helps you with your mental division facts. So for example, you probably know 7 times 7 gives you 49. And that means when I do 49 divided by 7, I'll get 7. And two negatives makes my answer positive, +7. -15 divided by 0. Okay, so this is the one I can't do. I can't have 0 as my second number. I'm not allowed to divide by 0. So see the difference between these two problems? 0 can't be the second number. It can be the first number because in this problem, I'm dividing by 6 or -6. That's allowed. There's no rule that says you can't divide by -6, but there is a rule that says you can't divide by 0. So what I'm going to write is undefined, or I'll abbreviate it UNDF, stands for undefined. That's what we say. It doesn't have a numerical answer. It is undefined. We are not allowed to do it. 10 divided by 2 is 5. One negative makes your answer negative. 66 divided by 6 is 11. One negative makes your answer negative. It doesn't matter if the number that's negative is the big number or if the number that's negative is the small number. It does not matter. If there's one negative, your answer is negative. J, 0 divided by 10. So those fractions, that just means to divide, right? Those little fraction bars. And 0 divided by 10, we actually just talked about this one. If you have $0 and you split it 10 ways, everybody gets 0. So you can do this one because 0 is the first number. You can't do this one because 0's the bottom number, the second number. You're not allowed to divide by 0. So skipping ahead to example L, this one's going to be undefined. And I'll actually spell this one out for you guys. You can write it either way on your homework. You can write it out or you can abbreviate it. And then skipping back to K, 60 divided by 20 is 3, and two negatives makes your answer a +3. Okay. All right, so that's where I'm going to stop. I know that your notes has one more problem. We can talk about this one when I get back tomorrow, but this is enough for you to go ahead and start your 2.1 homework. You're working individually on this homework for the rest of the class period. And when you're done, don't forget to scan in your work paper. Okay, so obviously a lot of these are just going to have answers, right? I don't think I really showed any work on these problems. But on the ones that have, say, 3 numbers or 4 numbers like these here, obviously I would want to see your work on that, right? So make sure you're showing your work when you can. And if it's just a problem where you have 2 numbers, you don't need to show any work if you already know it. Okay, so submit your work papers, scan them in when you're done, and good luck. I'll see you tomorrow.